Good evening. I'm Alice Norris, the mayor.
I'm Damon Mabey, Commissioner President.
Doug Neely, City Commissioner.
Trent Tidwell, City Commissioner.
Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll begin this evening with citizen comment. Do we have anyone who has signed up to speak to us on a non-agenda item this evening? Seeing and hearing none, then we will move into the adoption of the agenda. Is there any one here, a commissioner, who wishes to have anything reordered for any reason? All right, we will take the agenda in the order in which it exists. First, we have a public hearing. It is a continuation from September 3rd on the amendment to the Oregon City Transportation System Plan, and we are recommending that staff is recommending that it be moved to date certain of November 19th, 2008. May I have a motion for, well, actually, may I ask if there's anyone who's come to give public testimony this evening, because we will be glad to take it on this item. Seeing none, may I have a motion for continuance, please?
So moved.
I'll second, and then I have a question. What's the reason for the continuation?
It's dependent upon the development agreement.
Depending on the, okay.
There's really no need to do it if we don't have one.
Chicken and egg thing, okay. Moved by Commissioner Neely, seconded by Commissioner Mabey. On the motion, Nancy, the vote, please.
Commissioner Tidwell.
Aye.
Commissioner Mabey.
Aye.
Commissioner Neely.
Aye.
Mayor Norris.
Aye, motion passes 4-0 for continuance. Next, we'll move into our business agenda. And first of all, we have two guests in the audience who will help us work through some questions that we might have about the intergovernmental agreement that we are negotiating between Clackamas County Service District Number 1 and Tri-City Service District. In other words, the sewer agreement. We'd like to welcome Mike Kenzie, the general manager of WES, this evening. And Larry, are you going to introduce this?
Well, I'm going to let Mr. Kimsey talk through this with you and kind of explain the agreement, and then we can chat about some of the questions that have come up in regards to that. So, Mike?
Thanks, Larry.
And you've seen the list of questions provided by our attorney, I assume.
Yes, I got them last evening.
Great.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Also, let me introduce Chris Story, who's the county counsel for the district, and he's going to be helping me out with any specific questions that you may have. Let me just kind of go through the IGA in general. Just for the sake of the audience listening, the IGA itself really defines the relationship between the Tri-Cities District and Service District Number 1 regarding the Phase 1 improvements that are currently going on at the Tri-Cities plant. And it specifically covers those Phase 1, not anything outside of that. So, and if you recall, the Phase 1 improvements are CCSD Number 1 is investing somewhere in the neighborhood of about $65 to $75 million in the treatment plant. And what they will be doing is building a membrane facility in parallel with the existing plant that's there. And there's a couple reasons for it. The first reason is to return the capacity back to Tri-Cities that CCSD has been renting for the last 8 or 9 years, so that you have growth capacity to meet your own growth needs. And the second piece is to accommodate their growth for the next 8 to 10 years while we kind of figure out what we're doing from a community partnership standpoint. I also clearly wanted to state that Tri-City is not subsidizing any of these improvements at all. This is purely being paid for by CCSD Number 1, because I know that has been an issue in the past. Fundamentally, the IGA that's in front of you tonight is the same agreement that we presented to you back, well, I think that was November of last year, almost a year ago. The only thing that has changed is we've defined the financial instruments or the financial pieces of this agreement. So all the legal language is the same. What we've done here is spent the last 3-4 months with the city managers and also with the Citizens Advisory Council for CCSD, trying to put together a package that we felt was fair for everybody. And let me go through that because it is kind of a complicated IGA, but there's really two components to it. There's a capital component, and then there's also the O&M piece in terms of how we split the O&M costs as we go forward. And if you look at the capital piece, yep, go ahead. Operation and maintenance, excuse me, yes. And if you look at the capital component, we really broke it down into three different pieces. That is, the first piece is for a payment, a dollar payment for taking a portion of land out of service on the plant site for CCSD number 1. I think if I remember right, it was about 2.5 acres had to be taken out of service. So essentially what that is a payment for that land that's being leased over the 20-year period of this agreement. The second piece itself is a return on investment to the Tri-City ratepayers for facilities that they've already invested in that they will be sharing in common. And what we did is identified what those facilities would be that are going to be common use, and we essentially assessed the value of those, and we did a 5% markup on that as a return on investment. And then the third piece is what we're calling opportunity costs, and that is essentially a lump sum payment that Service District number 1 is going to pay for the opportunity to essentially build on this site and have the ability to come in and build on that site. Now, if I remember right, Mr. Patterson in his staff report had listed the individual lump sums of that. Let me talk a little bit about how we arrived at that. Is we actually set this up originally as annual payments over the life of the 20-year agreement. And the city managers asked us to look at taking the present worth of those payments and paying that as a lump sum in year 1 when this agreement started. The lump sum associated with this was $4 million. And we've had quite a bit of discussion on that, and I think that all the parties, at least in the preliminary discussions, are pretty satisfied with that lump sum piece. Yeah.
I think it was 4.2.
Okay, well,
It was 14.
there you go. And let me move on to the next piece, because this is really the operation and maintenance piece, and this will continue to be an annual payment to the Tri-Cities District, very much like we're doing right now with the diversion agreement. We haven't really defined that yet. I think what we all decided is let's get this capital piece set in stone, put aside, and then between now and December we would work out the details of the O&M piece. Right now, Tri-Cities is getting about $300,000 a year from Service District number 1 for the diversion agreement. The O&M split will probably be in that range, if not a little higher, because we're going to look at this based upon flows. The existing diversion agreement is not based upon flows. It's kind of a complicated little formula that was developed. So if indeed 50% of the flow coming into the plant is Tri-Cities and 50% CCSD, then there'll probably end up being a 50% split on the O&M costs. So what we did for the purposes of discussing what the benefit and the impact is to the Tri-Cities folks is we just took the figure that currently is going, that $300,000, and added it to the capital piece. And really what the benefit is to the Tri-Cities ratepayers over the next 20 years amounts to about $1.25 per month per connection in terms of rate subsidy, if you want to call it that. So there is a value to each one of the ratepayers with this agreement. Some of the other benefits, just let me touch on briefly before we get into questions too, and that's that as the manager of the district, I can tell you this is a huge plus from a risk reduction standpoint, in that you're going to be operating what's considered to be a high-value, high water quality system next to a conventional treatment. That allows us a lot more flexibility to meet changes in a regulatory environment as we go forward, as well as also adapt to changes that come down the pipe that sometimes have a chance to blow out our system. So this is a huge risk reduction issue for me. In addition, I think one of the things we've talked about at length is this also, if you look out a ways, when Tri-Cities needs to expand for their own customer base, Service District Number 1 will be putting in all the base infrastructure for this membrane system so that when Tri-Cities comes along, they're just going to be putting in the individual components and will not have to be putting in the base infrastructure. What that means is, on the long-term basis, is a lower unit cost to the Tri-Cities ratepayers. So, from my standpoint, there certainly is some benefits. So, why I'm here tonight is essentially to ask you to endorse this agreement. What my plan is right now is I'm also going to be meeting with Gladstone, with the City of West Lynn, also with the Citizens Advisory Committee of Service District Number 1, and get their endorsement. And the plan right now is to bring this to the Board of Commissioners, who are the governing board of the district, sometime in mid-November, so that we can get out to the bond market if the bond market ever settles down a little bit. So, anyway, in general, that's what it is. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
We discussed at our work session with Ted Kyle the build-out of the plant and looked at the structure and that kind of thing, so I hope, but two of our members were missing, so there may be some questions about that as well. But I think one of the things that we had talked about when we kind of endorsed the lump sum of $4 million for the opportunity was that we can invest that and draw interest
Correct.
on it. We can use that to buy down rates in the future, but it's it really is a sum that can work an opportunity for us as well.
Right. And if I can follow up on that, Mayor Norris, the discussion was putting that money aside and basically using that as a rate reduction method. It doesn't mean that we can't change that as we go forward, but that was the initial discussion, and it can be utilized that way and do pretty well. So,
Any other questions? Commissioner Neely?
On the existing facility, do you know offhand, has the bonds for building that facility been paid off? That is that a bought facility?
the bond for the Tri-Cities?
Yes.
We're not carrying any debt on the
You're not?
Tri-Cities
Okay.
facility. No. Tri-Cities district is not, correct.
No.
Larry, you want to walk us through the questions?
Yes,
I know
you
you had a
have a memorandum that Mr. Sullivan has put together. He has discussed the agreement with the city attorneys from both Gladstone and West Lynn, and I'm going to talk about the first three topics here, and then maybe a suggestion in regards to some of the language changes in here. First question that Mr. Sullivan raises, which is a good question, is whether or not this is a good arrangement for the ratepayers of Tri-City Service District. Looking at what we've arrived at, I do believe it is a good solution. Now, in here and in perhaps a different type of negotiation, and we started down this path, as you recall, when we met in a joint group, is we would get an independent financial evaluation. But this is as much a political decision as it is a dollars and cents type of decision. And you've got a couple of different bodies, and Mike and his staff have been working very hard to try to find a common ground between these entities. And I think where we're at, and you're going to have to remember, the train has kind of left the station because the construction is underway today, is, and at our last meeting, I think the group that met, the subcommittee, felt this was best deal was going to be able to put together. And both sides are kind of feeling a degree of pain. Pushing it any further, you're probably going to end up back in a court where there's no agreement and we still have a construction going forward and there's nothing coming in. So in that regard, you know, you can look at it lots of different ways. You could do a lot of analysis at great cost, and you could come up and say maybe there's another $250,000 here or $250,000 there, depending on which side you're on. I think all that's going to do is take you to a place where there's no agreement between these bodies. So, and for those types of amounts, it's probably not worth the investment of time, energy, as well as delay it would take to get to that point. So, a little bit, you kind of bite down and say, okay, this works. And I think that's where the parties came to when they're looking at this. In regards to landfill remediation, Mike, you said you had some information today. Why don't you share that with the commission?
Yeah, when we went into this IGA, we had money set aside for remediation of the landfill there. I think you may remember that when the land was purchased, we signed an agreement with the state DEQ that basically says when we open up the ground, we had to remediate that site. And so we did pull money aside for it because we really didn't know with the CCSD project whether we were going to hit the landfill or not. I can tell you that we have finished excavation out there, and we did not hit the landfill, and we are not going to be doing any remediation associated with this project. So the amount of language that was in the agreement was just in case. It's really a moot point at this point in time. So it does not mean, though, that Tri-City gets off the hook in terms of that original agreement. They still have to remediate at some point in time when it's necessary to get into that landfill area.
When Tri-City itself can expand.
Correct. Correct.
But you did the full extent of the expected excavation
Correct.
and found no
No, we did not hit that landfill.
refuse.
Yeah.
I'll come back to that issue
Okay.
here in a bit. In regards to the third item, the Tri-City Advisory Committee, first of all, let me say from a personal matter, if I was never called to meet again on a sewer issue, I would be more than happy. And I've expressed my feelings about the process. I won't go through that here. I think that's something we may want to look at, and there's a number of different wording changes here we probably need to work through. And so I guess my suggestion this evening, since the other entities have to take this up as well, and I haven't had a chance really to talk through this with my counterparts in the other cities, is that we set this back a meeting for final action, make sure we're kind of in general agreement in terms of questions, answers, and what have you. We can validate the information in regards to the remediation, and I can visit with Mr. Sullivan and see if that is satisfactory, as well as give us a chance to work through these other wording changes and make whatever changes to this IGA that all parties feel is appropriate, and then bring that back to you to next
You're
meeting.
talking about the 3 city managers. We're going to work, there's a funny microphone thing going on here.
Grenades turns it on. And
Okay, it's got a delay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're talking about the 3 city managers advisory committee.
Right.
And I know that that's going to be a topic also when the big group gets together to discuss the individual roles. So I'm wondering if that could also be written open-endedly, so that if we determine that a different role or more, either more or less governance, that could also be added.
Absolutely. And I would say that this agreement is probably going to be discussed in context of that discussion, and it could be either
Yeah.
rolled into those binding agreements or terminated and rewritten some other method.
Okay.
I would like to follow up, though, on the advisory committee. As you probably know, that was the role of the advisory committee is in the original charter, and it was part of the bylaws of that charter. So if indeed you want an expanded role, just from Tri-City's standpoint, that there's a different forum that has to take place in, and that's a discussion between this board and the Board of Commissioners, because we will have to modify the charter itself. And I've specifically tried to keep it out of this agreement, because this agreement is just purely focused on the Phase 1.
Well, since we know we're going to be discussing it, I think it's appropriate that you discuss it with your colleagues, and then you can deal with it.
Yeah, that advisory committee should be the city manager of West Lynn, city manager of Gladstone, and the public works director of Oregon City.
Oh, good try. Yeah, good try. Commissioner Tidwell.
Just hypothetically, let's just say one of the participants that are involved in this from the cities, they choose not to endorse you. Are you going to then go to endorse this? Excuse me. Are you going to try to work with them to go back and get an endorsement, or are you going to just present it to Clackamas County and say this participant or these participants chose not to endorse?
Well, I believe, and let me kind of answer this in an obscure way, I believe there's really only one outstanding issue right now, and it's about the buyback provision that West Lynn wants in there. The difficulty with putting a straight buyback position in there is the fact that I know the Board of Commissioners will never kick Service District Number 1 out of this arrangement unless they have a fallback position somewhere else. So putting a buyback position in just to say it's in there is a little, it's a little tough to justify. To answer your question, I'm going to do my best here between now and when I go out to the bond sale to get everybody supporting the agreement as it is. If I can't get it, I probably will have to go to the board and ask them to make the final decision.
Thank you.
And when are you planning to do the bond sale?
Well, we were going to do it the second week of November, but right now it looks like we're going to try to push this back until February and let the credit markets settle down a bit. If you haven't been watching, the interest rate on bonds have gone up about 2% just in the last 4 weeks. So.
Commissioner Mabey.
Going to ask the elephant in the room kind of question. The board of directors for Tri-Cities is, in fact, the county commissioners. The board of directors for CCSD is the county commissioners. They have now moved to co-locate their operations. Is this Phase 1 construction and Phase 1 of eliminating the two separate entities to merge them into one, governed by the Board of County Commissioners?
I don't believe so, and Chris could probably answer this better, in that these will remain as separate districts until the people within the district vote for a consolidation. So it's a fairly formal process if it moves that direction. There is no talk right now of that. At least I'm not privy to that talk. This is purely a financial arrangement for the decision to co-locate and take, the economies of scale out of this.
To follow up on that, a merger would require a successful majority vote of both districts to allow a merger. So the board wouldn't have the ability to compel any sort of consolidation.
I think we were pretty clear in the partnership committee also, but are we on? Okay, I think we were pretty, there it is. I think we were pretty clear in the partnership committee that we did not want to go to that yet without an intense conversation about it. I mean, it's a possibility for out there, but I think there were a number of alternatives that we looked at. So.
Yeah, certainly from my standpoint, the finances would be pretty tough to do if we tried to do that in the next few years, just because of the debt load that one district's going to be carrying. So,
Commissioner Neely.
I'm sure it would have come up at one point from Oregon City representation, but as you know, Oregon City is the county seat. A lot of land is tied up by the county. We get no remuneration from it. Well, maybe something from the housing authority, but in general we don't. And we're seeing a valuable asset being produced here, and yet we receive no direct benefits from it in terms of taxable properties. Imagine that must have been brought up at some point in the discussion. How was it dealt with?
it was brought up several times.
Like every meeting?
Just about every meeting. And I think and stop me if I'm wrong, Larry, but I think the general direction is that really needs to be part of the community partner discussion as we go forward, because the community partner discussion is looking at operating the system as a whole, which Tri-Cities would play a much larger part in compared to what this is, which is really a district-to-district arrangement. So it has come up. It was discussed. We tabled it until the next discussion.
It is not off the table.
I think this kind of ties into that bigger discussion about having a long discussion with the county about the impacts in Oregon City and really the regional partner that Oregon City has been, and how they may be more helpful in addressing some of these issues. Let me go back to the other issues. And again, the discussion right now in regards to that consolidation effort, it is a dual agreement, but I don't think any of us need to make a mistake. This step kind of marries these two districts at the hip. And as alluded to, I cannot see, once that step is taken, this ever moving in a separate direction. If anything, I think eventually it has to move to some type of consolidated effort. how well this relationship develops from this point forward, history is going to tell us that answer, and we have to hope for the best, and there's going to be some bumps in the road. This is an unholy marriage at this point because we come from different backgrounds. You have Tri-City, which is actually the consolidation of 3 cities. You have CCSD, which is a combination of cities and rural areas, and they definitely have different motivations in terms of urbanization and those type of policies. I think that's a broader discussion that will have to take place in all this as well.
I think I'd just like to reiterate once more that CCSD ratepayers will be stepping up big time with huge rate increases in North Clackamas County. And it was the negotiating position from the Tri-City group that our ratepayers be held harmless until growth is necessary for the trajectory that we're currently on. So I think that that's really an important recognition of the difficulty of them. I mean, the urban-rural split is really an important issue here, and I think we belong to an agency that's really planned for its future, and it's really done well with the arrangement that we've had. So the goals for consolidations have been very different here. But we're glad that we can provide partnership, and as long as we believe that this is fair, I think it's an advantage to both both groups. I guess there's more than that, really. 4 groups, I guess, to move forward together. Commissioner Mabee.
Yeah, I haven't been at every single meeting, thank goodness. But I've been following along with all this, and frankly, given the fact that, as I said, the hat's worn by the same people, the fact that there's significant payments coming to TCSD, and that will help our ratepayers. Additionally, to kind of address part of Commissioner Neely's question, you're not taking any more land off the rolls. You're building in the original footprint of that property. So that's the good news part of it. The fact that there's millions of dollars worth of capital that we can't tax, so there is benefit there. And after looking at the plans at the meeting we were at, and as opposed to the one that I did miss, the availability for expansion at, as you said, greatly reduced costs. I mean, putting a membrane in is 1/100th of what it costs to build the container, the building itself. So I do think in the long run we all win. My only concern is the same one I've had since day one, which is all of our sewer eggs are in one floodable basket. And the flip side of that, though, is if it does flood, then we got 2 different groups picking up the cleanup cost as opposed to just one. But we've been lucky so far, and I'll keep knocking on wood that we stay that way. And that's just my concern, that there isn't potentially a using the sewer term, a backup system in place for taking the load off each other. But the other side of it is the membrane facility is significantly harder to flood and take offline because the sanitation is contained as opposed to open ponds that can spill. Yeah. So there's a lot of pros and cons about the situation, but I think generally it weighs out in the Tri-City's favor on this. So
I urge you to look at the PowerPoint that Ted Kyle provided to us last time. There's tremendous redundancy built into the new expansion, and it will be very green. There are some very innovative additions to the plant, which is what, of course, we wanted in Reagan City, and as did the whole Tri-City delegation. So I'm really delighted, but I would urge also our citizens to check out that, if you're interested in how a sewer plant is going to be built for the future, to look at that PowerPoint as well. It should be online. Any other questions? Well, I guess we need to walk through the rest of the attorney's concerns.
No, that he said
I think
Well, you
those
did
are
the
things
3.
we need to meet and go through.
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to
Sean
provide us with a
raises
cleaned-up copy, and, okay, in
definitely
consultation.
some questions we need to talk
Okay.
through that haven't had opportunity.
Are there any other questions then from commissioners or comments from the 2 of you?
I guess I would just say that I provisionally think that, support this. Once the final
Right.
answer, I'll reserve that, but it's been a learning and beneficial experience for all parties. And you still have all your hair, so well
I do.
done.
It was brown 2 years ago, though.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, thank you very much. We
Thank you.
appreciate your time
Appreciate
and coming to explain it to us. Thank you. Let's move on then in our agenda to consider the request that was made to us at our work session from Clackamas County Land Trust to look at our SDC fees to whether a reduction might be available for affordable housing. Mr. Patterson.
You had, at your work session, you received a request from the Clackamas County Land Trust in regards to a buy-down of your SDC credits. I think they're looking for $90,000 in relief off the SDC payments, which are calculated on this project, I believe, at $165,000. When it comes to issues like this, as city manager, you always feel somewhat like an ogre when you begin to look at issues, but I think all of you are aware of the budget issues that we've been through, and as the testimony at your work session indicated, that the example that kind of comes to you from Portland that has actually created a fund in which to pay those SDC payments out of. We have not done that, so we don't have such a program set up, so it's a question of whether you wish to move forth on this. And it is a good project. It's one of those things that definitely we would like to see accomplished because it does provide relief for, in terms of home prices for some working families that are having a difficult time putting those together. If you want to move forward, I've given you some ideas of where you could get the money at. Really, I think there's two questions. First of all, if you wish to pay a portion of those SDCs, how much? Can you afford the entire $90,000? Again, when you look at SDCs, not all of that comes out of Oregon City. You also have Tri-City, you have South Fork Water Board, and I don't think those have been approached with a similar request, so you may want to see some of that come from that. If you want to do something less than that, whatever that number is, you might want to adjust what I've given here. I have a difficult time in really going to the utility funds to get money. Those are tight funds as it is. I won't say you can't do it, but it does mean there's things that are going to be delayed when we get to that. If you want to do something less than the $90,000, and let's say it's something under $50,000, you might just want to look at your general fund contingency. Now, what separates this from being a new program is, again, I think this is a one-time contribution. And then in the future, when the 5 years is up, if you want to look at creating such a program, then it's a question, how do you create some fund to pay this out of? That would be a program. This would be a one-time contribution.
How do we know that it'll just be a one-time contribution?
Well, that's a decision you're going to make.
It's our
What if it
choice.
happens? I mean, you can't.
Well, I would
just
indicate
development.
that because this is a project setting here and you would like to see this, we're going to make this contribution, but again, we're not going to engage in trying to create a fund to do this for future projects, at least for a 5-year period.
I think I need to ask, again, the two of you that weren't at the work session, do you know how the Land Trust works?
I know the
If
gist
it-
of it.
Okay, how they keep, because,
I will say no, because we
Okay.
have an audience beyond the forum.
yeah, let's actually have Sarah come forward who was at our work session, because, we've been committed to affordable housing in the community. We know that it's a big need, and I've certainly been supportive of the work that the Land Trust has done throughout. So if you would explain how your program works, I think, and how it keeps the homes affordable for working families, I think that would be great.
Okay. I think the main
Welcome.
thing that...
Would you introduce yourself,
Oh, I'm
please?
sorry. My name is Sarah Buckley. I'm the Executive Director of the Clackamas Community Land Trust. The way that the Land Trust works, and I think the thing that is most appealing to to government jurisdictions that actually put money into the land trust and put money towards us being able to buy the land, is that once those funds have been put into making those homes affordable, the homes are permanently affordable. So the community is saying, we want these homes to be affordable to first-time home buyers who are making below 80% of median family income. That's people typically making in the 30,000s and 40,000s. And once we've done that, once we put that subsidy in, which can be quite significant, those homes will always be affordable to generations of working families. So when people sell the house, they gain a percent of the appreciation, not the full appreciation, and that percent that they gain gets tacked on to the original sales price, and that's what the next sales price is for the next buyer. And so that kind of resale formula, we call it, assumes that the area median income will go up just a little bit. That's about equivalent to what that appreciation that the first buyer walks away with. There's about 200 community land trusts across the country. It's a growing model. There's more and more of them as people recognize that home prices are just far beyond the reach of a lot of working families. It used to be, maybe 10 or 20 years ago, that $10,000 in down payment assistance or a government loan like FHA would allow people to be able to buy a home, but home prices have gotten so far out of reach that you need now to put $80,000, $100,000 worth of subsidy into a house to make it affordable. I think the median home price in Clackamas County or North Clackamas County is around $300,000, and we're looking at folks who can afford a home around $130,000. And so that's the thing. With this project in particular, we're doing 12 houses, duplex style, on 3/4 of an acre on Morton Road, and because we're the developers, it's sort of on the lower end of how much subsidy needs to go in. These days, like I said, it's about $80,000 to $100,000 in the projects that we're looking at. So this one, it's $81,000 per unit of subsidy that we need to put into the project to be able to sell the homes between $120,000 and $140,000, so that they're affordable to our buyers. So that's kind of the tough news, and it takes a lot of different partners to be able to get that amount of subsidy. When we were developing our first subdivision in 2000, I think we used some home funds from the county, some federal funds, and that was it. And we were able to make the homes affordable. I think it was about $40,000 of subsidy. But prices have gone up since then, and over time land prices will continue to go up. And so the earlier we can get the land into trust, the better, because over time the subsidy will just have to be more and more. So we're looking at funds from the Federal Home Loan Bank, which is a membership bank of a number of banks around the region, the county with HUD and CDBG funds, and I know you guys are involved in the CDBG funds as well, SHOP funds, which were other HUD funds, general members and supporters, foundations, other folks who help out the Community Land Trust. But it takes a lot of different partners to be able to put that money in, which is the hard part. But the good part is that money, once the subsidy goes in, it's never goes away. It's not like the home can be sold and it's back on the market and it's no longer affordable. And what other folks do is they require that if for some crazy reason the homes were taken out of affordability, that money would be paid back. And so I would encourage, if you guys were willing to reduce SDCs, that you put the same stipulations, that it was some kind of, payable if the homes, we would pay those SDCs back if the homes were ever taken out of affordability.
I think the other interesting statistic that you provided was your success rate in moving working families into a different category.
Yeah, so
repeat that, please.
a lot of folks, when they move out of, for a lot of folks, the goal when they buy a community land trust house is to be able to ultimately buy a house on the market. And the largest community land trust in the country, Burlington Community Land Trust, did a study on 100 resales that they had, and about 70% or so of the folks who moved out of their homes moved into market rate houses, and that's what we've seen so far. We've had about 6 resales, I believe, and the majority of folks do move into the market. They're able to walk away with enough subsidy, and they've stabilized their lives. Maybe one of them has gone back to school. That's what living in this house has allowed them to do, or for a number of reasons, they've been able to then move on and into the market. So it's like a step to market rate home ownership where people can realize the full appreciation. That's not the goal for everybody, but it is the goal for a lot of folks.
Commissioner Tidwell.
Is there a sense of urgency to this now? I mean, is there do you need
Timeline.
a timeline? Do you need this now?
We are we're hoping for approval of our subdivision application within the next month from the Oregon City Planning Department, who has been very supportive. And once we have that, we'll purchase the land, and we'll start moving forward on infrastructure in the beginning of the year. We could apply the project funds at any point in the project. We have enough different financing and funding that goes into it that we can move cash flow around, but we hope to be done with the houses and with the projects by the fall of 2009.
I know that Commissioner Mabey and I were not at the work session that this was going to be addressed. I feel more comfortable having a work session issue to take a look at this and explore it more. I certainly would. I don't know if I quite feel comfortable in making a decision this evening in regard to this matter without doing that. And if pressed, I don't think I could be supportive of it because of the information that I'd like to request that we put this on a work session, if the time allows for you. To happen.
Absolutely. I would be happy to come to another work session, educate folks more, if you guys needed more information from me.
And I apologize for that flu virus that's going around has hit quite a few of us. So
I
that's what
understand.
happened there. So
Commissioner Neely.
I think a lot of people are under the impression that Oregon City is a place where you have more affordable housing, but I think it was even 7 years ago when we looked at the reports of affordable housing in the region, Oregon City at that point was just comparable to the rest of the region in terms of the percentage of affordable housing here. And I'm sure the housing stock that's come in since then is probably not much of it has been in the category of affordable housing. So we recognize this as a need. We've dealt with it both regionally and in the city in terms of our comprehensive plan of that need. Now, when you described affordable housing at the work session, I think you gave a range of percentages of medium income. And I did write it down.
Mm-hmm.
Could you summarize what that was?
Yeah, typically when folks say affordable housing, they mean below 80% of median family income, and that's who we serve. And our homes are affordable to people between 30 and 80% of median family income. I think our average homeowner at purchase is at 58% of MFI.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to hear, because when the discussion, when I was there at the Metro Policy Advisory Committee, they were talking about 50% of income, and if you said what, 58%? Mm-hmm. So you're targeting that same group. I have no problem with holding this over so that we could have a further discussion. I would say, though, I would ask, well, maybe I'll just pull off there other questions of her, because my other clarifications are with the city manager. So if there are any other questions from her.
Okay, Commissioner Mabey.
So I guess real quickly, for the record and our audience, what is considered median family income?
For a family of one, it's,
Well, we're assuming probably a married couple, just
Yeah.
because you're.
I keep the 80% in my head. I don't keep the 100% in my
Well,
head.
what's
Maybe
80%?
Dan knows.
We can figure that one out.
For a family of four, 80% is 54,500, I believe.
Okay. All right.
We spent a lot of, hello?
Yes.
you're on.
It's just you.
Okay. I just dead. It's not like the usual sound, so I'm sorry, it just doesn't sound right. And in fact, we do spend Metro Policy Advisory Committee spend a lot of time talking about affordable housing because it's a huge need in the metro area, and I believe we have more current numbers than the numbers you suggested. I believe we have some in the last 2 years that shows that we need affordable housing in Oregon City as well as the rest of the region. Right. Yeah, and in our current market, I think because we would be first, and we are a first city, but I think outside of Portland, you said that no other city has really done this.
You asked that question last time,
I
so I
did.
researched it because I
Good.
didn't know. I actually emailed my predecessor, who's in Africa and working for the Peace Corps, and she said that Clackamas River Water gave us a 25% break on our SDCs just because it was affordable housing, not based on any other calculations. And then West gave us a break, but I'm still trying to figure out what it was. I know they gave a break on the stormwater fees because there's bioswales and other components to that particular subdivision, but they may have given us an SDC reduction too, but I'm still researching that.
But the suggestion that I would like to make is that we don't give the full 90, that we would do something like $50,000, which would be about half of what you asked, and that we would encourage you to ask South Fork for some relief as well as Tri-City. And because I think for us to make a microphone's really bothering me. For us to make a pledge like that really does show our commitment to keeping housing affordable in the community. It's something we all need to step up to the plate to do. And so I'd like to see us, I'm very happy with us talking about it so that the three commissioners who weren't present, that's it, thank you, could understand how it works and see the materials that you had, if there's no urgency. But that's kind of my thinking, and I think it would be good for Oregon City to step forward in a small way to help, if it could. Other questions of Sarah?
I was just going to make a comment. There's rough calculations, but my guess is your 54 plus thousand was for the 80% level, and you said you have about a 58% average in terms of median. It's probably putting it in terms of your average median, average income looks like it's about 40,000.
Yeah, that's about right for the folks that we talk to. You need about 30,000 to be able to qualify for the mortgages that we're talking about. So,
Let's see. Yeah. Anyway, I don't have any more questions of her, but I do have other points
Sure, go ahead.
of discussion.
Go ahead.
What the city manager has indicated here is that probably the only utility funds, we're going to use utility funds that were available to us, I believe, were the water and sanitary sewer, where we're relatively healthy. Is that right? Compared to the others, anyway. Even though it's probably basically bookkeeping, if we're going to look at reductions, I would like to see it targeted to those utilities. That is, if a given fund is going to support it, it looks as if it's an SDC to that particular utility. I don't know if you can do that or not.
See, that would be a discussion point for me.
Yeah.
We've just raised rates on our citizens for specific projects, and I do not believe it would be appropriate to take it out of those funds. What? Yes.
Small amount to what we actually need
Yeah.
in stormwater, and we didn't raise sewer.
And it seems to me that we would get questions from citizens about that, why we would raise it and then give it away. So
Yeah.
I would like more
Well,
discussion on it, but
We probably
that's what I'm
we probably
thinking right
get
now.
questions from citizens for any level of subsidy anyway, but, and yeah, we can explore the other potential sources, which is probably one. But anyway, you mentioned 5 years, and is that tied to specifically what?
The annexation promise. So we're down to 4 now.
our pledge for new programs.
If you look at a special need type of issue that comes up in any given year and you want to give a contribution to that, that's not a program. That's not an ongoing cost. And you can do that, and that's what your contingency is about. Now, that has an impact on your 5-year plan. Now, if it's something that you get into where that's an ongoing program, that's a program.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying, and, if you think this is something that needs to be done, you could make that contribution. I think that's still not a violation of the pledge you've made, now, unless you get into an ongoing contribution or program to fund multiple projects coming on. Then that probably borders on that. That's what's going on.
It's, from a practical standpoint, I mean, you said a one-time thing. I almost feel you do set a precedent. I mean, other people approaching us and say another land trust coming forward and saying, well, you did it for somebody else. Now, why can't you do it for me? And I think that's something we're going to have to really think about.
That's an issue that the commission has to wrestle with.
No, I think that's important for us to understand what criteria we're using to make this decision. I also want to just point out to you, since I thought that it was very key, is that these particular homes are also going to be LEED certified. So they're going to be training and helping those families to learn about energy conservation. So I I'm also pleased with that aspect of your proposal. So we'll put this to our next work session, which actually isn't until December.
Right.
So just know that that's then, and we'll see you back again.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
In the meantime, do contact those other two agencies, because
Okay.
I think what would be good would be for the three agencies to come up with, a program that, maybe we don't, they do most of the hauling for the first couple of years, and then, when we see where things are settled out, we maybe pick up the strain. But, in a lot of cases, the SDCs we're collecting are pass-through, and we're collecting them for those agencies. So, for us to abate it means we're just paying the bill for you. Not that we're not doing that all the time, as Larry hammers us for. But if they're willing to step back, we're willing to not collect. So.
Commissioner Neely.
I assume that these numbers you gave us, however, are only the city SDCs. They do not include South Fork. They do not.
No.
They do.
Yeah, they're listed.
Well, this is the entire picture.
Yeah, they're delineated.
In the staff report, Commissioner Neely, you'll see that the 16,000 is for South Fork Water Board and 19,400 is for Tri-City.
Oh, okay.
So about
Of
30.
the water, 16.
So that listing we have on
35,000.
page 4 is
It
inclusive
includes
of...
South Fork and
Okay.
Tri-City.
Okay, we'll see this again, and thank you very much. All right, next item on the agenda is a resolution 8-37 to vacate a public sanitary sewer easement located along the south side of Library Court, a project for Clackamas County. And I assume Nancy Krashauer is the staff report on this, or City Engineer and Public Works Director. Nancy.
Thank you. I was just looking for my green sheet. This is pretty straightforward. As part of the new development services building that the county's constructing up here on Beaver Creek Road, we've determined that an existing sewer line that had a public sewer easement over it is not needed by the public anymore. It can become a private sewer line that serves just their facilities. And they've requested that we vacate the easement, and the city, from my perspective, has no problem with that. So we need your approval.
Okay. Are there any questions of this, or a motion? Commissioner Neely.
No, it's not a motion.
Okay, Commissioner Neely.
She said it was straightforward. Maybe it is that straightforward. Do we have any other entity that connects into our sewer facilities in which they actually maintain their sewer system? When you say it's under their responsibility, is it the same thing as my sewer line going to the city connection for my house?
Essentially,
Okay,
yeah.
so that's essentially how.
It's one property owner.
Right.
And so they can have the connection to the sewer system. If you
Okay.
had two property owners connecting to a pipe, that pipe has to be public.
Okay, then I understand how it operates.
Yeah.
All right.
And a motion?
I move the approval. However it should be worded.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Neely, seconded by Commissioner Tidwell. Is there further comment or discussion? Commissioner Mabey.
Just to follow up on Commissioner Neely's question, is there any foreseeable possibility that the properties on the other side of Library Court would be connecting to that line, and that it would then have to revert?
It's still Library Court is a private street, and that is one large property that the county owns, and they've consolidated all. They had a couple of ancillary lots, but that is one large property held by Clackamas County. So even if they connected, it would still be a private line.
On both sides of Library Court?
Yes.
Okay.
They own to the street. Further questions? Nancy, the vote, please.
Commissioner Tidwell?
Aye.
Commissioner Mabey?
Aye.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Mayor Norris?
Aye, motion passes 4-0. And the last item of our business agenda is the minutes of August 20th. We have a
No,
mo-
the last two items.
Oh,
because-
there are?
Commissioner West
Oh.
isn't here, so we can...
Yes.
You can do it all at once.
Okay, we'll take item D and E as a consent agenda. May I have a motion for approval, please?
Second?
Moved by Commissioner Tidwell, seconded by Commissioner Mabey. Nancy, the vote, please.
Commissioner Tidwell?
Aye.
Commissioner Mabey?
All right.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Mayor Norris?
Aye, motion passes 4-0. that concludes our business agenda, so we will move to communications, and first, our city manager, Mr. Patterson.
Madam Mayor, members of the commission, yesterday I sent you a update in regards to the Laurel Lane subdivision issue and the meeting that we had with those residents. I've also put a memo at your place this evening, and I just wanted to touch base with you on that. At the present time, unless you have objections, we are proceeding with items 1, 2, and 3 of those actions. Again, we've asked residents if they have issues there is to call 911. We will respond. If the residents are able to identify the offending party, we're going to take a no-tolerance policy to some of the behavior that's been going on that street. Chief Harris is going to be contacting the fire department, talking about the possible closure and fencing of the fire gate that exists there between the subdivision and the apartment complex. And I've asked Chief Harris to look into what it would take to install security cameras and what those costs may be as well. We'll take those actions, and if that clears up the problem, then that'll be fine. If not, then we'll come back and talk about some of these other possible actions if we have to do that, unless you have objections to this.
And are there any commissioners that have questions or wish to take a different approach?
I think
Commissioner Maybe?
I'd say that what you've outlined is the prudent initial steps, and hopefully we can locate and dissuade the primary focus, and the street can return to a more normal
Hopefully.
activity.
You can tell that the emotions are running high on that street. I think if we're unable to get some resolution, it will remain volatile, and hopefully we can do something
Larry,
before somebody gets hurt out there.
You
Well,
said you were doing 1, 2, and 3?
Yes.
So if that doesn't work, then you're going to go to 4, 5, and 6?
We'll begin to look at those, yes.
Okay. I
I
don't
mean,
have
when you get below that, there's some issues with those that may be difficult, particularly the part about whether you can make that a private street. That's a tough go. It's an option, but it's a tough go to get there.
thank you. Thank you for the work on that.
And that concludes my report.
Okay. Are there reports from commissioners this evening? You do? Anyone? Commissioner Maybe?
Just a brief update. We had a report at the Clackamas Heritage Partners about their planned expansion and access to the falls. They've, I think, come up with quite an exciting vision. We just need to figure out how to come up with the $30 to $40 million to make it come true. But some of their original and initial steps, the good news is it was really well laid out as a step 1, a step 2, a step 3, and they're, I think, significantly manageable chunks. And I kind of look forward to them maybe bringing that to the city proper to see about some of that being included in the comprehensive plan dealing with McLaughlin Boulevard frontage, the eventual usages of some of the streets, and kind of a concept plan for that area that I think could really benefit the city and the county and the region as an attraction. So they've got good vision, and they're realistic about what they can accomplish. So that's. And when it all is said and done, we might be able to actually get down there on the falls and get wet when without it flooding on us first.
Yes, Commissioner Neely.
One of the things, as I recall, that came up was actually as part of the early phases, the ability to get directly from the museum over to the other side of the Highway 99E. We've got the request for support from the state in terms of the promenade repairs, and there currently is a pedestrian overpass over that highway. It's probably not at the best location. And I don't know if there's something that can be done in conjunction with the state so that if, in fact, we see that's a possibility, that we take that into account in terms of our repairs. Should that be closed off or something else to extend that promenade wall all the way across there if we're going to cut that, if that is going to be cut off.
They were talking about that. Yeah.
Yes, they are. And it makes the one redundant, and I don't think the one is used that much anyway.
Yeah, and really, if you're going to have good pedestrian access there, it needs to be improved. That's, for a guy that doesn't really like heights, that's a little scary, that one walking across
Yeah.
me.
I love that.
Especially when the trains come by and it starts
Oh,
doing this.
I think that's one of the most exciting places to be in the city, see the action.
I think right here is the place to be.
Okay. There were actually, Scott Archer was there, Larry Patterson was there, and the three of us at that workshop, and I think that the necessity for us to sit down as a community and city to plan that area, how we'd like to see it if this access project goes forward, is going to be required the next couple of years. They have a vision for it, but I think we need to have a community vision for what goes in that section around there. They whether we foresee that as visitor services, whether we see that as commercial, whether we what we do in that section. But so I just think that needs to be in our work plan, maybe next year. But that was a very interesting proposal, and they are using Jones & Jones, a very well-respected international firm out of Seattle. So it's pretty exciting stuff. That was, who was that? Commissioner Tidwell.
We want to mention that at last commission meeting, I brought up the fact that we had lost our location for conversations with the commissioner at Acme. I am happy to say that there is a new business, a new coffee shop that is in that location. Haven't had an opportunity to go in there yet. I have a couple of locations in mind to have our forums at. I haven't quite secured those yet, but at our next meeting I will. So I'll have a definite location for us for those, for the conversations with the commissioner, but I did want to also mention that that location, that business has been filled with a kind of like business, so that's nice. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. I have several things. As you know, the League of Oregon Cities met last week in Salem, and Commissioner West and I represented us along with Larry Patterson. We will be talking about the legislative agenda that we adopted there and had a chance to grill legislators there tomorrow night at City Hall Day. We have at 5:30. We'll all be at Carnegie Center, and hopefully we'll have some candidates. I'm not sure that there are any sitting legislators that will be present, but will be a chance for us to talk with Gladstone, West Lynn, Oregon City, and Lake Oswego about the shared legislative agenda, because often there is a disconnect between what cities need and desire and what the legislators focus on in Salem. So it's a good opportunity to get our licks in before the legislative session begins. So I also will have some reports from the League of Oregon Cities a little later as the topics become relevant. I went to a fabulous presentation on volunteerism, which I will present later. But the other thing that happened...
One more time. The time on that, again, is 5:30?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And on the 8th was the big Metro regional meeting. I don't know, 200 people there, maybe? 250. Nancy Krashar was there. Were you there too, Dan? And Dan was, I didn't see you there, was there also. It was so big, I'm sure I missed a zillion people. I thought that there were some very interesting things that I'd like to present, if you'll indulge me. Chris Nelson from the University of Utah, I thought presented some demographics that were food for thought. The boom to come, we're expecting this million people, and we learned a little bit about who they might be. The majority of the people will be going to the south. The Sun Belt of the West, about 29% of the newcomers will be going to the Sun Belt of the West, which is essentially us with global warming. The interesting thing is that we will be tearing down about 200,000 homes during this next 20 years and replacing them with probably 500,000 new homes. So the building boom is going to be tremendous here. The lifespan of a home is 165 years. The lifespan of a big box is about 10 years. I thought that was absolutely fascinating because when you come to a home, you fix it up, then the next owner fixes it up. And I had never heard that statistic
The
before.
lifetime of the home is how long?
165 years is the average life of a home.
They must be
And,
including the East Coast in that, 'cause
yeah, right, I think we're not quite 165 years old here yet. But I think some do. This might be an average. But then also, who are going to be living in our homes? Well, child raising now has become a temporary phenomenon. So the houses without children is 86% of the growth will be in homes without children. And conventional suburbs are the losers in the population expansion. 30% of people want to live rural. 51% want to be in a city or a suburb near the city, and then 19% will be a conventional suburb, which are essentially for families. People without families don't really want to be there. And most of us want detached housing, 62%. That's interesting, I think. 60% of us...
You've lived next to somebody with a loud stereo.
Well, there are some changes, yes. 60% of us want a small lot, which means less than 7,000 square feet.
Less mowing.
I think this is the most interesting one of all, though, that has huge implications for how we build cities, in that today, home ownership is about 60% of us want to own our homes. In the future, 50% will be rentals. We don't really care about that so much in the future, it appears. Also, an interesting thing, he talked about the demographics of the urban area, since we are an urban nation now. So the least foreclosures are in the urban centers. The most auto-dependent neighborhoods have the highest foreclosure rates because people do want to live and work near and be near their services. So I thought that was extremely interesting. So it has implication on how we build, where we put our public finances, and what services do we provide in cities. So I found that extremely interesting. And Nancy and Dan, do you have anything to add to that?
Issue with the suburbs being less popular is the fact that the cost of transportation is becoming more and more expensive. So people are starting to realize that.
Yeah, and he added the cost.
Families with children will, too.
Yeah, the cost of transportation and housing is mixed together as the fixed cost and measured in the future. So that raises the cost of housing as you move out from the city centers, too. It was very interesting. I thought one of the most fascinating things about the day was that Metro had provided on the floor a map about as big as this room that was a Google map of the region. So they took a picture of anyone who was an elected official in the room standing on our city. So you could walk the Willamette River, you could visit neighboring communities and see, I study maps, but to see the relationship by walking was very, very interesting. So that was really worth the price of admission to me, was to see this amazing map of the region and in such detail, and see how close we were to our neighbors and how much we had in common or not. So that was it was really a pretty good day. Now, our next joint meeting is next Wednesday, which is focused on, is it transportation or land use? I think it's land use. First is land use. So it's a joint JPACT, MPACT, Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation, and MPACT, the Metro Policy Advisory Committee on Land Use. We'll be talking about, again, we're trying to marry transportation and land use together, as we were just talking about housing and transportation belonging together. So that's the next regional meeting as we move toward the big decisions that we'll be making over the next 2 years. And then the last thing that I have, tomorrow morning, the Willamette Stakeholders Group, which is a Wesleyan Oregon City group that's looking at what we do with the falls area and environment, whether it should be a National Heritage Area or a state park, and we'll be meeting with state parks as well as the professor from the University of Oregon Landscape Architecture Department that's doing some design with students. It's called a studio. There we can, and for the first studio, which is this landscape architecture speak for, I guess, student projects, we have funded, the county has picked up that, but in the spring, they would like to do some refinements on those, which we haven't seen yet, and that will cost more money. So I likely will ask you if we can have a presentation together on the results of what we might see as results, because we will be asked if we would like to assist in funding some of those studios going forward. This is a fundless project, and we will begin to be needing commitments from all of the partners of which we are one as we go forward. So tomorrow is actually, do we want to continue on this road, and who has money to bring to the table on this? It's essentially still a planning project. So think about that. Are there any further reports? If not, we are adjourned. Okay, not bad.